What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Watch It in Action. I'm BouseFeenux, and today we're going to be talking about the Queen of Poison, Saryn Prime. Cut. Saryn Prime was just released with the Saryn Prime Access and is now farmable across various Void missions. Saryn Prime features higher armor, sprint speed, and power base over the regular Saryn, as well as an extra polarity slot, which will come in handy when fitting the build I've put together. Saryn has also recently been reworked as well, and in the hands of an experienced player, she can be extremely devastating as an endurance frame. The tricky part about playing Saryn, though, and honestly one of the best things about her, is that her powers synergize very well with one another and require the player to build up what I've deemed layers of damage. Now, we'll cover all that here in a second, but first, let's take a look at the build that I've put together. Alright guys, so taking a look at the build here, first it's important to note that I've only put one Forma on this build. She comes with the extra polarity, which is actually a Y pull, and that's going to be super helpful for fitting some of those more expensive power strength mods on here. The one Forma that I've actually gone with here is just to fit corrosive projection, because she actually comes with a D polarity aura, which can be kind of useful. You can use the rejuvenation or physique, and that'll increase her overall health, which is really nice. But I went for corrosive projection because having that reduced enemy armor is going to help out with some of her abilities. So, taking a look at the build here, though, we've got Primed Flow, which is super important. It's going to increase her power max and get us all the way to a whopping 850 power, which is tied with Volt Prime for the highest power pool in the game. Very impressive. Definitely want to get this on here. If you don't have a Primed Flow, you can definitely use a regular flow. You just won't have as much energy or as much power. So, that's an option for you. Streamline is going to increase our power efficiency, and the thing about Saryn, the thing that makes her so difficult to build, is you need pretty much positive stats across the board. Some of you out there may agree with me, but I found this build to be very, very effective. So I want to hear what you guys say in the comments, but let me show you this build, and you guys can make your assumptions based on that. So Streamline is going to increase our power efficiency, which is really nice. You're going to be spamming spores a lot and a lot of her other powers, and she's very energy hungry. The next up here, we have Prime Continuity. So having a lot of duration is very important here in this build, and Prime Continuity delivers that. Now, you can use a non-primed continuity, but it's just like the Primed Flow, it's going to be a lot less effective. Next up here, we have Stretch. Power range is really important. Some people may argue that you need an overextended, but that's going to drop our power strength too much, and Stretch gives us a pretty good range on a lot of our abilities anyway, and if you're playing Saryn as a melee frame, Stretch is going to be all you need anyway. Next up here, we have Vitality, and this is one that I'm still kind of struggling with. You guys can let me know what you think about this, but I think Vitality is important because Saryn has such a high base health and a very high health pool. She scales very well with Vitality, giving us 925 health, which is pretty formidable. I like having all this health here because it allows me to take a little bit of damage. The only thing is I think this might be better swapped out with a Rage, because she uses so much energy. I tend to use energy pads to compensate for that, but I think a Rage would be really good. The only thing is you would lose a lot of this health, and Rage wouldn't be as effective. And you can't really fit both on this build, in my opinion. I don't really think you can. You can swap out Regenerative Mold if you want, and just use health restores instead of energy restores, but either way, I think you're going to be lacking something. So, next up here, we definitely need power strength on this build. That's really important. Intensify is going to deliver that. It's just 30% power strength. It's going to give us, enough power strength to kind of get over some, just to get enough to kind of coincide with this transient fortitude and give us 185% power strength, which I feel is more than enough. Some people may opt for a Blind Rage instead, but I feel like Blind Rage drops our power efficiency too much, and when it comes to duration over efficiency on this build, I think that efficiency is more important because you're going to be casting those powers a lot. Regenerative Molt is the last one on here, and some people may argue with this as well, but if you're going to be casting Molt a lot, which if you're playing this build, you probably should be, especially since it's so useful, Regenerative Molt is going to be a little extra added bonus because it's going to regenerate our health, and Saryn is kind of squishy. She's got 225 armor, which is pretty good, but we're not using any armor mods to take advantage of that, so having Regenerative Molt there to give us health back after we cast it is a nice little added bonus, and I think it deserves a spot on this build. So, now that we've got all that taken care of, we looked at the build and everything like that, I'd like to go with you guys through each of Saryn's abilities and show you kind of how they work with one another. Now, the wiki page for Saryn reads kind of like a textbook, and it's quite detailed, so I'll try to summarize. Let's go over and take a look at the abilities real quick. So first up on the abilities list, we have Spores. This ability is pretty much the foundation of how Saryn works, and in order to get the most out of this build, it's important to understand how to best use this ability. Essentially, Spores can be cast on an enemy or cast on Saryn's Molt, which we'll cover next. When the spores are cast on an enemy, they'll continuously deal viral damage until popped either by you, a teammate, or an enemy effect. So that means like if they slam on the ground or something like the bombards or the corrupted gunners do, that'll cause them to pop and they'll do a little bit of burst damage and generate a guaranteed viral proc. This is really important because it sets us up to use some of Saryn's other abilities to great effect. Some tips to maximize this ability basically are to use an area of effect weapon, as that will most easily pop the spores, allowing them to spread. So like an Ignis or an Amprex or something like that, or even a Tonkor, that'll cause the spores to spread to other enemies and allow you to use some of the other abilities, which we're going to cover next. After mastering spores, we'll add Molt to the mix. Molt allows Saryn to shed her skin and leave behind a decoy that will attract enemy attention. When Molt's timer runs out or when the decoy is destroyed, it'll explode, dealing toxin damage in a radius around it. You can also trigger this explosion by simply casting another Molt. Molt's effectiveness can be maximized by casting spores on the decoy, which will then transfer to nearby enemies after it explodes and detonates the spores. It's also important to note that this ability is affected by a regenerative Molt mod, which restores health as Molt is active. Saryn's third ability, Toxic Lash, is another ability designed to help you propagate spores at a rapid pace. When activated, Toxic Lash imbues Saryn's melee weapon with toxins and adds up to 30% of the weapon's total melee damage as toxin damage that is treated as a separate instance of damage, which means it doesn't combine with any elementals on your weapon. Toxic Lash will also add 100% status chance to every strike made while the ability is active. Most importantly, Toxic Lash will also pop any spores casted on the enemy, which opens up some pretty insane melee possibilities for Saryn. Lastly, we have Miasma. If you're new to the game and head to the wiki and the first thing you see is the page containing all the info on how Miasma works, and your head doesn't explode from information overload, then Warframe is definitely the game for you. There are a lot of factors that contribute to Miasma's damage and mechanics, but I'll try to keep it simple. What you need to know is that Miasma is an AoE skill that deals corrosive damage in a radius around Saryn. The damage will tick for an amount of time based on power duration, and the damage dealt by Miasma is increased by 100% if the target is affected with a viral or toxin proc, and will do 200% extra damage if the target is affected by both. This should essentially be used as a finisher ability. When all targets in the area are affected with spores, viral procs, and toxin procs, it's a good idea to cast this to finish off a massive portion of enemies' health. Now that we've taken a look at each of Saryn's abilities individually, I want to show you how they all work together and how you can play her effectively, so let's take her for a quick spin. Alright, coming in hot, I'm going to cast my Toxic Lash to get my melee weapon primed, and then I'm going to try to put as many spores on these enemies as I can. I'm going to do that by just casting spores. I'm going to cast Molt, put spores on that because you can keep stacking spores on it, and then I'm going to finish these guys off with Toxic Lash and do a lot of damage. These guys in the back here, probably going to use Miasma on them to finish them off quickly, and then after that, it's pretty much just rinse and repeat. You have enemies chase you around, you throw a Molt down, you spore it, you let them kill that, and then you either Toxic Lash to finish or Miasma. Popping those spores is going to do a lot of damage, and then if you've got Miasma, that's going to help finish them off as well. So that's pretty much Saryn in a nutshell, guys. I know there's a lot that goes into her ability. She's kind of complicated. Some of you might be a little turned off by her, especially if you're a new player, but she's really not that bad, and if you can get a little better at understanding how her abilities work, she's going to be a very rewarding frame to play, especially late game. She's got the health restore, she's got a lot of energy, she has really good scaling with her damage because she does a lot of viral damage, so this has been another episode of Watch It in Action, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed this one. I worked really hard on it. And if you'd like to see more builds like this, make sure to check out BouseFeenux.com. Just remember to turn your ad block off because it really hurts me when you guys use ad block. It hurts my content, and I like making content for you guys. So until the next video, I will see you guys later. Thanks a ton for watching, and have a good one.